The small-town school had always been quiet, with nothing too exciting happening. People came, people left, and life went on like a slow, steady song. But one Monday morning, something changed, though no one realized it yet. A new substitute. Music teacher arrived. She was a woman in her mid-30s, dressed simply in a long sweater and plain shoes. She didn't wear makeup or flashy clothes. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her voice was soft when she introduced herself to the office staff. No one really paid her much attention. She just looked like another quiet fill-in, who'd probably leave after a week or two. The regular. Music teacher had gone on sudden leave, and the school needed someone fast. The principal had told the staff, "Just give her the lesson plans. She'll follow them." Nothing fancy. And that's exactly what the teachers expected, nothing fancy. The music class wasn't easy to manage. Kids were loud and most didn't care about the subject. Some saw it as a free period to joke around or play with their phones. When the new teacher entered the music room for the first time, she smiled gently and said hello. A few students nodded back. Others barely looked up. No one took her seriously. One of the senior teachers gave her a binder of lesson plans. "We've been working on classical music," he said with a smirk. "Next up is Rachmaninoff. You'll need to demonstrate it for the kids." She blinked and turned the page. "Prelude in C-sharp minor." "Exactly," the man replied. "It'll be good for them to see it played live. You can play, right?" He didn't wait for an answer before walking off. The truth was, she hadn't played in front of people in years. And this piece wasn't easy. It was one of the most dramatic and difficult piano works ever written, but she said nothing. She simply nodded, held the binder tightly, and walked back to the dusty old piano. In the corner of the room, that afternoon, during lunch break, she stayed behind while the other teachers chatted in the staff room. She sat at the piano and gently opened the lid. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment. Then she played a few quiet notes. Unbeknownst to her, the janitor had come in to empty the trash bins. He stopped in his tracks when he heard those. Notes rich, heavy, and deep, even though she played them softly. It didn't sound like a beginner or someone just following the lesson plan, but as quickly as she started, she stopped. She closed the lid again, stood up, and walked away without noticing the janitor watching her curiously. Later that day, whispers started. "She's too shy to play," some students joked. "Maybe she can't even read music." Others just ignored her. Some teachers, thinking they were funny, said she might quit after trying that Rachmaninoff piece in front of the class. But she didn't say anything. She only nodded politely and continued teaching basic rhythm and music theory, letting the kids drum on the tables or sing small tunes. She stayed patient, even when they laughed or talked over her. No one knew who she really was or what she was capable of. They just saw a quiet, modest woman who didn't talk much and didn't stand out. But deep inside, behind that calm face and soft voice, was a story no one at that school could have guessed. And soon, without warning, the entire school would learn the truth in a way they'd never forget. The next day, the school felt the same students, rushing to class, teachers busy with papers, and announcements echoing from the old speakers. No one paid much attention to the music room or the woman who now sat quietly behind the desk. Flipping through the lesson binder again, she looked calm. On the outside, but inside, her heart was heavy. She hadn't played that difficult piano piece in years. It wasn't just about the music, it brought memories with it. Painful ones. That's why she had left the stage long ago. But now, here she was, being asked to perform it again, not on a concert stage, but in a noisy school gym filled with teenagers and skeptical teachers. By the second day, the students were even more restless in music class. Some whispered that their new teacher would soon embarrass herself trying to play such a hard song. Others barely listened at all. One boy laughed during class and said loudly, "Hope she doesn't break the piano trying." She heard everything, but said nothing. She simply smiled and moved on with the lesson. Her calm response confused some students. A few of them started wondering if maybe she was just being nice or if there was more to her than they thought. During lunch break, she returned to the music room again. This time, she made sure no one was around. She sat down slowly and opened the piano lid. She looked at the keys, her fingers lightly brushing over them. She played a few soft notes again, nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just enough to feel the sound again. The janitor, the same one from the day before, was in the hallway. He stopped when he heard the notes and stood silently by the door. He didn't want to interrupt, but something about the way she played pulled him in. It wasn't perfect or flashy. It was careful, emotional, like the piano was holding part of her story. Before he could say anything, she stopped again and closed the lid, just like yesterday. She stood up and walked out without noticing him. Later that afternoon, during the weekly staff meeting, the principal brought up the upcoming school recital. "As you all know," he said, "we've got the music showcase next week. Since our regular teacher is still away, our new music substitute will be performing." A few teachers exchanged glances. One of them chuckled. "She's really going to play Rachmaninoff." "That's the plan," said the principal. "It'll be good for the kids to hear something serious." They didn't mean to be rude, but they had already made up their minds. To them, she was just another quiet temp trying her best. They didn't expect anything amazing. If anything, they were preparing for something awkward. That evening, she sat on the edge of her small bed in her rented room. She looked at an old photo beside the lamp. It showed her on a grand stage years ago, wearing a long black dress and sitting at a shining piano. She had once played in front of hundreds, even thousands. Back then, the music had been her world. But life had changed. Things had happened. Loss had come quietly and without warning. And just like that, she had left the spotlight, walked away from everything she loved. Now here she was, being pushed into the light again, not by choice, but by duty. She sighed and closed her eyes. Maybe this was just a job. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something more. The school had no idea what was coming. The school recital was now just a few days away, and posters started appearing on the walls. "Music Showcase this Friday" was written in bold letters. Under it, the words "Live." "Piano performance by our new music teacher" were printed in smaller font. Students walked past the posters, laughing and whispering. Some joked about how boring it would be. Few said they were coming just to see how badly the new teacher would mess up. The same loud boy from before even said, "Bet she won't make it past the first page of the song." In the staff room, the mood wasn't much different. Some teachers were kind, but many still didn't take her seriously. "I hope she at least tunes that old piano before the show," one said, sipping tea. Another replied, "At least it'll be over quickly." Heard their comments, but she didn't respond. She only smiled politely and returned to her classroom. She was used to being underestimated. That evening she stayed behind again in the music room. Everyone else had gone home. The halls were quiet. The windows let in the soft light of the setting sun. She uncovered the piano and sat down. Her hands rested on the keys for a moment, moving. Then slowly she began to play. This time, it wasn't just a few notes. She played the first full section of the difficult piece. The deep, crashing chords echoed through the empty hallways. Her fingers moved with strength and control. Each note was filled with emotion. She wasn't just playing music. She was remembering. She was feeling she was letting the past come alive, even if only for herself. Behind the slightly open classroom door, the janitor stood again. He had come to mop the floor, but stopped as soon as he heard the sound. He didn't say a word. He didn't move. He just listened. When the last note faded, she sat there quietly, breathing deeply. Her eyes were wet, but she wiped them quickly. Then she stood up, closed the lid of the piano, and turned off the lights. She had no idea anyone had heard her. The next morning, the janitor told one of the teachers, "She's not what you think." "What do you mean?" the teacher asked. "She's something else," the janitor said, then walked away. The teacher raised an eyebrow but didn't take it seriously. Later that day during class, student asked the music teacher if she was really going to play that scary piece at the recital. The question was sarcastic, but the teacher replied calmly, "Yes, I am." The room went quiet for a moment. Some students exchanged looks. A few smiled mockingly. "She's brave," one girl whispered under her breath. The students didn't know what to expect. Some were curious, others were still sure it would be a mess. But deep down, something about her calmness started to feel different. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from fear. It was the kind of quiet that hides something, something powerful. The day of the recital was now just around the corner. Chairs were being set up in the gym. A small stage was built. Parents were invited. Teachers prepared short speeches. The school buzzed with small talk and guesses about what the piano performance would be like, but the music teacher, she didn't talk much. She didn't complain. She didn't try to prove herself. She simply waited, and soon everyone would understand what silence had been hiding all along. The day of the recital finally arrived. It was a Friday afternoon. The school gym had been transformed into a small performance hall. Folding chairs were neatly arranged in rows. A stage was set up at the front, decorated with colorful banners made by the students. At the center of the stage sat the old upright piano, polished the night before by the janitor, who now stood quietly in the back corner with his mop leaning against the wall. Parents started arriving, chatting softly with one another. Some held programs in their hands, reading through the list of performances. Came to see their children sing, dance, or play small instruments. No one was really there for the piano solo, at least not yet. The teachers sat near the front, whispering among themselves. Some were curious, others still had smirks on their faces, waiting to see if the shy woman would make a mistake or freeze on stage. Backstage. Behind the curtain, the music teacher sat alone on a bench. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her eyes were closed. She wasn't nervous, but her heart was beating fast. It had been a long time since she last played in front of people. Her fingers still remembered the piece. Her heart still remembered the pain behind it. But this time, she wasn't playing for the world. She was playing for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for the few who were willing to listen. The principal stepped up to the microphone and welcomed the audience. One by one, small student performances began. A group of second graders sang a cheerful song. A boy from 5th grade played a simple tune on the recorder. Parents clapped politely, took photos, and smiled proudly. Then, near the end of the program, the principal returned to the mic. And now, he said, looking at the paper in his hand, "Please welcome our music teacher who will be performing a classical piece on piano, Prelude in C-sharp minor." There was a light clap. Some people adjusted in their seats. A few teachers raised their eyebrows. The curtain opened slowly. She walked out quietly, wearing the same modest sweater and long skirt. Her hair was tied back like always. No makeup, no shine, just her and the piano. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and looked at the keys. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then she lifted her hands and began to play. The first chord crashed through the gym like thunder, deep, powerful, and full of emotion. Heads turned, people straightened in their seats. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered. The second chord followed, just as strong. Then the melody began haunting, beautiful and bold. Her fingers moved with grace and purpose. Every note was precise, every pause filled with meaning. She didn't look up once. She didn't need to. She was inside the music. The students who had once laughed sat wide-eyed, staring. The teachers who had doubted her leaned forward, mouths slightly open. Even the younger kids, who didn't understand the music, felt something they couldn't explain. It wasn't just skill, it wasn't just memory, it was soul. Her hands danced across the keys, rising and falling with the rhythm. The soft parts were like whispers. The loud parts shook the wooden floor. It was as if the piano itself had come to life, telling a story no one had ever heard before. When the final note rang out, the room was completely still, a breathless silence. Then suddenly clapping, first from the back, then the sides. Whole room. Loud, real applause. She stood up slowly, nodded once, and walked off the stage. She didn't wait for praise or questions. She didn't need to. She had said everything she needed to say without using a single word. And for the first time since joining the school, she felt something different. She felt seen. After the recital ended, people stayed in their seats longer than usual. Some parents whispered to each other, surprised by what they had just seen. A few even walked out still in shock, asking each other, "Where did she learn to play like that?" Students gathered in small groups, some excitedly talking, others just confused. Many of them had never even seen a live piano performance before, especially not one so powerful. That wasn't just playing, that was something else. It felt like a movie. It felt real. The teachers, especially the ones who had laughed earlier, were unusually quiet. One of them finally said, "I think we've all been wrong about her." The others nodded slowly, unsure what to say. Backstage, she sat on the edge of the small bench, breathing slowly. Her hands rested on her lap. Her body was still, but her heart was full. She wasn't thinking about the applause. She wasn't waiting for compliments. She had done it. For the first time in years, she had let the music speak again. It had spoken loudly. As she stepped into the hallway to leave, a few students were waiting outside. One of them said shyly, "That was really cool, miss." Another added, "I didn't even like piano before, but now I want to learn." She smiled kindly and nodded. "Thank you," she said. "Music can surprise you sometimes." The janitor, standing nearby, gave her a thumbs up and said softly, "Knew it." The next morning, something felt different at school. Students smiled at her in the halls. Some waved. Few even asked when the next performance would be. She wasn't invisible anymore. In music class, the atmosphere had completely changed. The same students who once ignored her were now sitting up straight. One boy asked, "Can we learn that song too?" She laughed gently. "One day, maybe, but let's start with something simpler first." Even the staff had changed their tone. During the lunch break, a few teachers came to her room to chat. Of them brought her a cup of tea. Another one apologized for misjudging her. She accepted the kindness with grace, saying, "It's okay, I understand." That day after school, the principal called her into the office. He cleared his throat and said, "I saw the performance last night. Honestly, it was the most powerful thing we've had here in years. You've truly brought something special to this school." She nodded, still humble. "Thank you. I'm glad the students enjoyed it." He looked down at a form on his desk. "We'd like you to stay with us, not just as a substitute. Full time, the kids are responding to you in a way we've never seen before. You've inspired them." She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window for a moment. The schoolyard was quiet, a soft breeze moving through the trees. For a long time she had kept herself hidden. But now, for the first time in years, she felt something new. Maybe it was time to stop running from the music. She turned back to the principal and gave a small nod. "All right," she said, "I'll stay." That evening, as she walked home under the golden sky, she thought about everything. About how she had once stood on big stages. About the years of silence that followed. About the pain she had carried quietly. And now, somehow, in a small school with a broken piano and noisy students, something had changed. Not just in the classroom, but inside her. Something had started to heal. Weeks passed, but people at the school still talked about the recital. It had left a mark. Even students who normally didn't care about music started asking questions. Showing interest and paying attention in class, everything was different. Now, the woman who was once overlooked had become the most respected person on campus. But she didn't change her way of speaking. She still dressed the same, still walked calmly through the halls, and still smiled softly when spoken to. She wasn't looking for praise. She just wanted to teach, to share what she loved. One morning, a group of students showed up early to the music room. One of them knocked on the door and said, "Miss, can we come in before class starts? We want to practice." She smiled and opened the door. The piano, which had sat unused for years, was now the heart of the room. Students gathered around it, like it was something magical. Some even brought their own keyboards from home. They asked her to teach them how to play not just basic notes, but real music. Music that made them feel something. She began staying after school, offering free lessons to anyone who wanted them. The janitor would sometimes stop by, leaning against the door, smiling as the room filled with music, laughter, and the sound of kids trying their best. Even students who weren't naturally good at music wanted to be there. They said it felt peaceful, they said. She made them believe they could do something special. One day, a quiet girl who had trouble making friends came up to her and whispered, "I don't talk much, but when you play the piano, it feels like you're speaking for people like me." The teacher paused, her eyes softening. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder and said, "Music says what words sometimes can't. That's the beauty of it." Word spread beyond the school. Some parents called the principal to say thank you. Others asked if their kids could join the after-school sessions. A few older people from the community even asked if she gave lessons to adults. The school decided to start a small music club. With her as the lead, they gave her a little more budget, and she used it to fix the piano and buy new music books. She didn't ask for anything for herself. Everything she did was for the students. The other teachers who once looked down on her now came to her for advice. One said, "You've changed this school. We didn't even notice how quiet it used to be." She only smiled and replied, "Sometimes the right note at the right time can wake up something that's been asleep." But even as the school bloomed with music, few people knew the full story behind her talent. They didn't know about the concerts she used to give, the awards she once won, or the tragedy that made her stop playing for years. She had locked all of that away in her heart. Not out of shame, but because it still hurt. One afternoon, whilst cleaning the music room, a student found an old newspaper clipping inside one of her books. It showed a younger version of her, dressed in a black gown, playing on a grand stage. Headline read, "Rising Star Shines on International Stage." The student brought it to her with wide eyes. "This is you?" She paused for a second. Then she nodded slowly. It was, "Why didn't you tell us?" She looked down at the piano, then back at the student. "Because this isn't about who I was. It's about who you can become." And with that, she closed the book, placed it back on the shelf, gently pressed a single note on the piano. The room went quiet again, but this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning it had. Been a few months since the recital, and the school had changed more than anyone expected. Music had become something more than just a subject on the timetable. It had become a feeling, a connection, a reason to stay after school and be part of something beautiful. The once-forgotten music room was now the busiest place in the building. There was laughter, effort, and most of all, heart. The teacher who once sat quietly at her desk, ignored by students and doubted by staff, had now become the soul of the school. One day, the principal called a meeting. "We've been approved for a small grant," he announced. "Enough to buy a new piano, or even invite someone to give a special workshop." Before he could finish, one of the students raised their hand. "Can we use the money to organize a concert for the community? Want to show everyone what we've learned?" The room went silent. Then slowly the principal smiled. A wonderful idea. Preparations began. Students wrote invitations, created flyers, and practiced daily. The teacher guided them every step of the way, but this time she didn't need to play a solo. She had already given them her voice through their own hands, their own music. On the night of the concert, the gym was packed. Parents, teachers, neighbors, even people who didn't have children in the school came just to see what the music club had created, or small duets, group performances, even original songs written by students. In the middle of the program, the students made a surprise announcement. They invited their teacher to the stage. At first, she shook her head, gently from her seat, but they insisted. When she walked up, the room stood in applause. Some people clapped, others wiped away tears. No one said a word because they didn't need to. She sat at the piano and looked out at the crowd. Then she looked at the students who now smiled with confidence. The same students who had once laughed, talked over her, or didn't care about music at all, and she realized something. They had changed, but so had she. She played a soft, short piece. Nothing grand or dramatic, just a few simple notes that spoke louder than any speech. It wasn't about showing her skills anymore. It was about sharing a moment. When she finished, the students joined her on stage, one by one, holding flowers, cards, and small thank you notes. One boy whispered, "You made us believe we could do something big." Another girl said, "You made this place feel like home." After the concert, many people stayed behind just to talk to her. Some asked how she learned to play so well. Others asked why she never told them about her past. She always answered with the same kind smile. The past was important. But this is enough. Later that night, as she packed up the music books and turned off the lights, the janitor walked by. He didn't say much, just looked at her and nodded. "I told them," he said quietly. "I told them you were something else." She laughed softly. "You saw what others didn't." Sometimes, he said, you have to listen closely to hear the truth. She walked home under the stars that night, feeling lighter than she had in years. Not because of the applause, not because of the praise, but because she had found her place again. Not on big stages or under spotlights, but in a small school, with scratched floors and old windows where music had come back to life through the hearts of children, and in helping them find their voice, she had found hers too, not by speaking louder, but by playing from the heart.